Robert is a good friend of mine, not just a colleague, which made it all the more surprising to me when he asked that I preach a sermon with the subject of hope. And even more surprising that Jason somehow went along with that idea. Moving on towards perfection. Being raised an ELCA Lutheran, and though I found my way to Methodism thanks to Tom Herron in this very church, hope isn't necessarily something that comes easy to us, I think, largely because we come from areas like Sweden and Wisconsin, where you might be aware it's cold, at least sometimes. Right now, it's very hot, weirdly hot. But I'm excited to be here with you, my home church, be in the church that I work quite a bit during the week, giving out food from the food pantry at. And I am hopeful. I am hopeful right now in this time, despite the fact that there often feels like there's not much to be hopeful about. To preach on love and justice right now seems to be a difficult minefield to navigate. We're in a world that doesn't feel like there's a lot of hope, let alone a lot of justice. And sometimes love seems so very absent. It's not in the news or in our papers. It's not in many of our conversations, our places of work, or even around our dining room table. It seems like we have a shortage of those things going on. So when I pick this parable, it might seem a little strange, but I think there are threads of it. There are threads of it that tell us a little bit about living in times like these and seeing the kingdom and hope and justice when it seems too bleak to understand. These vineyard workers in this parable worked in brutally hard conditions. The technology that we now take for granted, cultivating and enriching our soil, that didn't exist at this time. In this region, to work in a vineyard, to work deep into the soil and grow things from it, was back-breaking labor. And it was back-breaking labor in a world where very little freedom and hope was to be found. It was a land that was occupied by the Romans. It was a land where people knew daily oppression, where injustice was a sting that they often felt. But here was a vineyard owner who would give a fair day's labor to those who would stay under the sun and toil on those vines, growing those wonderful and even sacred grapes, the fruit that would become the wine that they would use, the wine that they would even sometimes declare as holy. And they would toil from sunrise early at 6 o'clock in the morning until sometimes the sun went down. It was difficult and brutal work, but it was work in a place where work could be difficult to find, where wages had to be carved in stone or in wood or fished out of dangerous seas. So there's a group of workers that had been hired early in the morning. And they had gone to toil in the vineyards to grow those grapes early in the day. And they had begun that hard work as the sun crested and came high into the afternoon. But there was more work to be done in the vineyard, even as this first group toiled. So the owner hired additional people, knowing that his vineyard had more work in which to be done, more fruit which it could bear. He returns to the market and hires more to work in the garden. And finally, even as the day is coming to the end, The vineyard owner knows that there is still more work to be done in the vineyard, and knows that he sees people who need that work. Those who have not been called to the toil of the day's labor, yet still need the wages of a day's work to live in that harsh, oppressive, and brutal reality. He knows that there are those standing in the marketplace who still long to have hope, who long to taste of justice, who wish to make holy wine and be a part of something greater than themselves. He knows that there are those who have need, so he calls them to work. And I have to be honest, when he goes to pay the wages, I think I would have been, if I was in that first group that had labored all day, I would have been just as upset as they. After all, they had toiled. Their sweat, their sunburn, their aching backs and arms had worked for an entire day, yet those who had worked only a fraction of the time, or half of the day, received the same wages, the same blessings as them, and it seemed to them unfair. And I have in me that same feeling, that same sense of fairness that says, I want what is due to me, and makes it hard to see others receive benefits and blessings when I judge them as undeserving and their wages as unfair. We don't know the situations of these workers. We don't know why some of those workers came to the marketplace late in the day. Maybe they had missed the first call because they had been caring for a sick child or parent. Maybe they had been injured and were recovering. Maybe they had just not had enough hope to roll out of bed in the morning and make it to the marketplace early. Or maybe they had just come close to giving up. We don't know. And so too, when I think of unfairness, there are so many things that I don't know. So many situations, yet somehow deep inside myself, I still have this same pull, this same moment that says, it's so unfair. The work that I do is not what I would call backbreaking. Emotionally, sometimes, yes. But most of the time, not the brutal sort of work that they would have done in the vineyard. For 13 years that now make me realize how old I am, 13 years that mark a time when I preached in this pulpit and had no gray hair, to now when I have so much more. I think that can be said for several of us that grace this pulpit. I don't know if I'd say grace, that stand in it. Let's not say grace. But after 13 years, I still learn a lot every single year, every single day from my students. College is a difficult time. And frankly, it's more difficult now than probably at any other time. Though it may not seem like it, what I see every day is students struggling with problems that I couldn't have imagined when I was their age. The pressure, the cost, and the amount that they have to sacrifice, the possibilities that they have after they graduate, how much they have to learn and do, all greater than was expected of me at that time. And they handle it, I have to be honest, a lot better than I did. UNCG is an institution who has worked very hard, in much the same way that Greensboro College has as well, to be a home for a diverse population of students. Nearly half of the students at UNCG are racial minorities. making it one of the most diverse campuses in our entire state. It also has the largest LGBTQ plus population in the state of North Carolina. It has well earned the UNCG gay that once was used as a slur, but now we hold with pride. It's a place where women have historically, even when they have been held at arm's length from academia and from higher learning, received life-changing and world-class education that has allowed them to change our communities and our world. It is a place where students come who are first-generation students who have never been in college. No family has the knowledge, has the experience to be able to support them in the way that I took for granted. It is a place where hope stands a little differently than many of the other colleges in our system. It ranks among the top schools in the Southeast and in our nation for upward mobility. Students who come from highly impoverished families that are building better lives for themselves. And in COVID, it's become a lot harder. 2 out of 3 students at UNCG struggle now to pay for basic needs. More than half of our students go for periods of time where they go hungry without access to food and skipping meals. Students report that they can't replace clothing that needs to be replaced. They try to balance what books they can go without and still pass their classes, despite going into overwhelming amounts of debt to do it. They are students who are fighting an uphill battle made even more difficult during COVID. This church has committed and has done a great deal to help them during that period of time. Since the first shutdown of COVID, out of this fellowship hall, we have delivered more than 94,000 pounds of food. And that amount goes up every week. Thousands of hot meals have been given out, not just to students, but during the early pandemic when kitchens were shut down, to community members and to families who needed food. This church, perhaps more than any other church in our district, perhaps even our conference, has used its facilities and its resources to dramatically alter the lives of young people attending college at UNCG and Greensboro College. What I learn from these students who struggle and who find their way even through those hardships every day is not only that they're better people than I am, but they can hold on to hope at times that I think I would have given up. They can step out of themselves and beyond themselves. They can stand in chasms that seemed uncrossable, to embrace people that are radically different than them, to find ways to love and hear and have conversations with people that are from different backgrounds, of different races, different levels of ability, gulfs that we once thought might not be overcome for generations. They sit in the same room, they support each other, they share when they have more than they need, they ask for help when they need it, and they are vulnerable with each other. They find ways in more difficult situations than I can imagine to radically love not only their close friends, but people that are radically different than them. Despite what we might often think, college is not actually a time that polarizes or pushes people to the far ends. As a matter of fact, despite what rhetoric might say, 46% of college students identify through college and after college as moderates, people who seek the middle. Only 26% of students identify during college as being liberal, even though rhetoric might say that it's a left-shifting experience. It's not. More, what it does is pulls people from either extreme towards the middle. And I think that happens because we see a generation moving through college now who desires to heal wounds that have long plagued us. They desire to be different. Kramer and Fordham, who are two people, along with other colleagues, who do a great deal of research about health and togetherness in our social structure, have identified that they think there is something that is a growing public health emergency, and they call it hate-motivated action and reasoning. That what we actually have in our society is a growing epidemic of adults who do more and more, who engage in society more and more, who make judgments about others more and more, that is motivated more by hate than by any other thing. When once feelings of togetherness and hope might have united us, they have been replaced now with online hate, with growing gulfs, with actions that would have been unthinkable. Violence has become a daily thing that we talk about. So where's the hope? Where's the hope in all of this that Robert asked me to speak about? I think it's in this. That when we hear this parable, when we think about our world, that first gut reaction that we have about unfairness is not one that we have to hold on to, not something that we have to rest with and give up that it's something we have to live with. Instead, we as people have an opportunity through the grace and love that has been given to us by God, by Christ, by each other, to choose something different. To choose something different as so many young students in college are choosing. They, to us, could be an inspiration. They, to us, could model for us what it means to embrace love instead of embracing judgment. We can give up our ideas of fairness, our ideas that cause us to hold on to and protect what we have, and sometimes hope that other people fail, so that we can justify all of the things that we have. We can become people who love. And we can become people who love deeply, who hope mightily, who share grace overflowing, if first we give up the idea of this unfairness and embrace a call to God's justice. Embrace a call where we don't look from scarcity, but we say that we want to love all people. We want to see the blessings of God given to each person, whether they came in the morning or the afternoon or the evening, because we know what it means to be given more than we need by a God who loves us recklessly, by a God who opens his purse and gives more than we have ever deserved, whether we started toiling at the beginning of the day or its end, who calls us to love, to family, to son and daughtership, even when those cries seemed impossible. A God that gives us a pathway through love to find a way to overcome oppression, to find a peace that brings justice. And when we have justice, When justice has become ours in the streets and in the places where it seems impossible, then we will know a love that truly looks like the kingdom of heaven. We will know what it means to have no enemies, but to have all of God's children brought close and to sit in these pews and eat of this table of the feast of love. And we will fight no more about who toiled in the fields longer, but will rather celebrate the gifts that have been given to all of us. We will become a people who do not ignore the plight of refugees or the suffering of children. We will become people who no longer say we will live with the scars of systematic oppression and racism. We will not see ourselves as more deserving, and we will not forsake our responsibility to heal the wounds of the past simply because we didn't feel we were responsible for them. We will continue to support the opportunities for young people to teach us how to be better people, to better themselves and have hope. We will be people who stop judging other people because of how they see themselves or who they love. We will simply celebrate with them in their love, in their marriages, in their buildings of family, and we will call them to the same table. We will no longer be churches that split because some people so desperately don't want to sit in the same pews as people who are different than them. We will truly be united Methodists, not divided Methodists. The problem with that gut instinct that we have that sits down low in us is that it sows strings of division and bitterness in me, and it pulls me away from God's justice. And without justice, though I might say that I love another person, what I have is not love. Love cannot push us away from others, but only pull us towards them. If I only love the people who it is easy to love, if I only call for justice for people who are like me, then what I have is not justice, and what I have is not love. And who I walk my days with is not Christ. Because in Christ there is only love, and there is only justice, there is only grace, and there is only hope. So we cry, and we sing out for justice when we come to this place. We cry out for justice and love because we want to be with our Jesus. We want to give up the things that pull us away from people that sometimes sit deep within us. We want to be born anew in a world where the unfair no longer bothered us, but rather we mark the success and our blessings in this world by the love that we have for others. Justice demands that we not look away. Justice demands that we not give up. Justice demands that we pull people close to us who seemed beyond God's grace, who we once called enemies. God's justice causes us to tear down walls and open borders, to find those who live in different places and love differently. It calls us to be more like the students that attend the campuses so close to us, who find new ways every day to relate to people incredibly different from them. So perhaps my hope is in a generation who has more hope, who cries out more for justice, who loves each other so deeply. Perhaps my hope is that I can learn something from them. Perhaps my hope is that in the way that Christ dwells within them, I can see glimmers of a different kingdom, one of grace and mercy and love. And I will have the opportunity to reconsider some of the assumptions that have kept me away from God. Perhaps I will become a person who doesn't seem to hope so little in this world. Perhaps when someone asks me to preach about hope, I won't think to myself at first, why? But rather, I will know that I have a hope that I cannot wait to share, and a love that I will not hold back and away from anyone. So let God's justice be done from generation to generation, because our hope is in Christ.